the horror genre. I'm your host, Nicole, and it's time to share another dark tale.
Welcome back, friends and weirdos. In this episode, we are kicking off round 2 of the Religion and Horror series, and we're going to be talking about the Clovehitch Killer from 2018. And I'm very excited because I am joined by a good friend of the show, Sunny, who is a returning guest. Welcome, Sunny.
Hi, good to be back.
Yeah, this is kind of special because the first round of Religion and Horror I did a solo episode, but you were the first guest I had on for Religion and Horror for Midsummer. And so here you are again. You're the first guest for round 2.
Like I said, I'm happy to be here. This is obviously one of my favorite podcasts, but coincidentally enough, one of my favorite topics. So, again, I'm super excited that you had me back. So thanks for thinking of me, as always.
Yes. Well, I had to do it because normally when folks guest on my show, they choose a movie they want to watch and we cover it. I approached you with this movie because it is very true crime focused and you are like a true crime freak. Mm-hmm. I feel like you know more about true crime than maybe anybody else I have ever known. And so I thought, well, if I'm going to cover this, it's gotta be Sunny. So normally what we do at this juncture is we go over religious background, but we did that last time you were on the show. So folks, if you want to hear Sunny's whole religious background story, you can go to the Midsummer episode. But just to remind folks, I would say agnostic, is that a good way to describe where you are?
Ever changing too, Yeah,
ever changing. Yes. Isn't that the truth?
Yeah.
Okay. So since we did religious background last time, in lieu of that, I want to talk a little bit about just true crime in general. We could take all night. We're not going to take all night. But I thought it would be fun to just briefly touch on some of our favorite true crime films. And this is a 2-part discussion. Also, why do you think humanity is fascinated by true crime? Feel free to tackle those in any order you would like.
Oh man, that's something that I am still kind of like struggling with to understand, myself. Because I get asked all the time. I mean, even my own husband, for example, he does not share the same interest and passion that I do. And, I get it. That's a tough one to nail down. I guess before we dive into that, I'll talk about a couple of my favorites. The 3 that have really stood out to me. So I really got into Monster, the Jeffrey Dahmer story, when it first came out. That was amazing, starring, Evan Peters. Mm-hmm. And I believe that's a Netflix produced series.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. That one was fantastic. I think that it's very aligned to, the actual events that took place. But there's a lot of great dramatization that really kind of helps push this, duality that, I know we'll get into with Clovehitch as well. But just that duality of personality of operating. I mean, and that's kind of the MO of serial killers in general, right? They can operate, one way, public or forward facing, and then they have this very dark side, very, secret life. So yeah, Dahmer, or that series in particular was fantastic, kind of, delving a little bit deeper into that. My other favorite, more on the documentary side, is, have you ever seen, speaking of religion and horror, have you ever seen Paradise Lost? The child murderers.
I actually have not seen that one, which is a little crazy. Also because it occurred in Arkansas. So it's one that I should have seen by now, but I have not.
Man, it's fantastic. And it really just plays off of that idea. I mean, without giving anything away, 3 local teenagers are accused of the murder and mutilation of 3 young boys. And the town and how the trial was spun, it's really focused on like personal interest and tastes of these boys, and of course they're all into like Metallica. They dress up, one of the boys accused, like admitted that he read a lot of like Anton LaVey and Aleister Crowley. So they became, the scapegoat for these local murders. And, again, without ruining anything, you just have to watch. It's fantastic. And it really kind of talks about or delves into a little bit more like that satanic panic that was, a little bit more prevalent, maybe like
yes.
these. I think this was like early 90s when this doc came out, but still very relevant. Great watch. One of my favorite true crime docs. And the last one, my absolute favorite, I think right now, is Nitram. And that is a true crime film, based on true events, but it revolves around, are you familiar with Martin Bryant and the events that took place, I guess, in Australia? It was basically a mass shooting. And I think that this happened before autism became more fully understood in our, I guess, society. And I think that Martin Bryant suffered, a great deal, and because not understood, and just dealt with a lot of issues, and eventually things turned out the way that they did, again, without giving too much away. But Nitram is a fantastic film, again, based on true events, but it takes a little bit more liberty in terms of looking into like his personal life and things like that. But it's fantastic. And again, I talk about these in particular because I feel that they parallel, pretty well with what we'll be talking about tonight too.
So the Nitram, I had never even heard of that movie until you sent me the trailer, and I love Caleb Landry Jones, and when I watched the trailer, I was like, oh yeah, I've heard of this event. I don't know a lot about it, but I will definitely be checking that one out now.
Oh, this is honestly the first film I've ever seen him in, and I was like, who is he? He's amazing.
Really?
Yes, yeah. But he kills it. He's fantastic. I don't know. It's unsettling, but like in the best way. They just did such a wonderful job, like shooting it, and it was casted so well. Great movie. I think it's on Prime now. I used to have to stream it from a third party because it was very fine. But now I believe it's on Prime and available, because I think it's an Australian film as well. But awesome movie.
Yeah, definitely have to check that one out. I started watching Monster, the Jeffrey Dahmer story. I got, I think, 3 episodes in, and I could not finish it. I think it was really well made. I think Evan Peters was doing a great job, but I was like, I can't spend this much time alone with Jeffrey Dahmer. Like, I can't do it. Yeah. So I am glad to hear that, like, it continued on, on the trajectory of, like, being like faithful to the story and everything. But I was like, I think I'm going to have to be out.
Yeah.
Although his story does fascinate me quite a bit in all of the, pantheon of serial killers, like him and Gacy are just like sort of on another level, And
that's, you kind of got me thinking too, in terms of like why people are interested in this subject matter. And I think about somebody like you, and I've had plenty of conversations with people who absolutely love horror, but cannot do true crime. And the difference there is, I think the word true, this stuff is real life events with real people, real victims, most importantly. And it's very difficult. And I will say, again, I became a mom last year. There are certain things that I could watch and listen to then that I cannot do now. Because I have a child, and I never thought that would be true for me, but here we are. So I get that. And, a lot of times too, one argument I always hear, and I don't know how true it is or not, but I think it's worth noting. Many people who I've had this conversation with feel that if you've actually experienced tragedy, loss, sadness, some unfortunate event like that in your life, it is much harder to delve into that subject matter. So I actually have heard the argument that people who are into it may not have necessarily had, difficult occurrences, like in their life. And I'm the opposite too. I've heard a lot of people utilize it almost as a form of therapy, because it helps them come to terms with whatever it is they may be dealing with. So, I think it's the best thing I can attribute it to is like riding a roller coaster or visiting a haunted house. Like, there is a real element of danger, but you are so far enough removed from it that it doesn't obviously directly affect you. For me personally, I've always been interested in extreme personalities and what makes someone, which again is why I was so excited to talk about Clovehitch, because prime example, right? But that for me is the most fascinating part. Again, the personalities that perpetrate these crimes, or how they get to the level or the point in their life where, is it inherent? Is it learned? Is it that nature versus nurture thing? So I think I don't know. I think some people are just wired to really want to understand why somebody ticks or how somebody ticks rather. And I think naturally being interested in those, anything darker, in general, having this relate to real human beings, real victims, real places, for me, just that much scarier. So, there's that aspect, but, it's not lost on me either that, again, these are real people, real victims. So it is tough because it's consumed as a form of entertainment, and it feels weird to say that, right?
Yeah. Well, I will say that your point about people who haven't had any kind of a real tragedy are sometimes likely to consume this. I have actually said that about horror before. And I don't know if it's necessarily true or not, but I was like, I had a really great childhood. I haven't really had any major trauma or even death. I've lost grandparents and stuff, but I've never lost anybody super close to me that was untimely or something, So part of me has always wondered if I need to consume horror to feel like a complete person, to be balanced. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because people are sometimes surprised when they find out that I like scary stuff, because they're like, oh, you're such a happy person or upbeat person, and I'm like, yeah,
this stuff. Cool.
have layers. But so I just find it interesting that you made that parallel. Also, I just started reading a book by a local Arkansas author. His name is Colton Scrivener, and he wrote a book called Morbidly Curious. And it's about, he's a psychologist. And so he's been doing a psychology study for several years now on why people are drawn to horror, to true crime, stuff like that. And I just started reading it. I'm only a few chapters into it. But he talks about how, like you said, riding a roller coaster, that people, and even in the wild, you see this exhibited where animals need to be able to familiarize themselves with a predator or with danger, but from a safe distance. And that there's actually a psychological and evolutionary advantage to familiarizing ourselves with danger and death, but in a safe way.
Interesting.
Yeah. I was like, I feel so validated. Right? A scientist wrote this,
Awesome. That's perspective. I never thought about it too from the view of a predator and prey, even though that's very much what we're talking about, but how that comes up even in the animal kingdom. So we're just doing what's natural. Yeah. Right?
I do think it's definitely something to consider and something to think about. I know, especially with with the Dahmer show, there was kind of a little bit of backlash about this is all about him and you're not really putting emphasis on the victims and remember this is real people. And so I know there's been a larger discussion about being introspective about why we consume this as entertainment. And so I just think there's a lot of good points being made on both sides. But I do think that it's different than horror in that there is this sort of almost social responsibility to have some respect.
For sure. Yep, absolutely. I agree. Yeah. And I think as long as you're conscious of that going into it, I know a few, for example, podcasts that are true crime oriented. And they do a great job of, they may talk about a case and, cover the murderer or, whoever the perpetrator may be, but then they'll take like, however long within the episode to really focus on the victim, their life, they'll interview people who were close with the victim. So like you said, you're kind of getting both sides and getting a gentle reminder, hey, like this was a real person who lost their life. This isn't just, something for you to consume for your entertainment or amusement, So I think that's important. I think that falls on the listener or the watcher as well to keep things in perspective.
Yeah. Okay, so let's pivot and talk a little bit about Clovehitch. So why we chose this film. Again, usually my guest is the one who chose the film. And so I'll pose that question to them. But this time it was me. So I chose this film because it's been on my radar for a couple of years now. And I was kind of just interested in the premise. I don't think I had even seen a trailer. I had just sort of heard about it. And so I checked it out on like a lazy afternoon. It was, in my feed somewhere. And I was like, oh, I'm finally going to watch this. And I was just like so pleasantly surprised. I really like the tone of this movie. I like that it's kind of a slow burn. Mm-hmm. I like that you think you have it figured out and then you don't. So I liked all of that. But what I did not expect from it was this evangelical church setting that reminded me so much of my own history, being a kid, being a youth in the church. And so that really is what made this something I wanted to talk about. And now religion is not, at the forefront of this movie, really. It's not really what this movie is about. But I do think that the religious aspects of this movie and in this family have a lot of meaning in what's going on with this bigger story. So it's something that I wanted to talk about. But before I roll into the plot synopsis, I just want to know right off the bat, did you like this movie?
I did. I think I would say like leaning on the side of, like or dislike. I'd say I was like 70% in.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. Because after I watched this, I went like sort of down a Reddit rabbit hole to see what people think about it. And there are some strong opinions about this movie being bad. Yeah. And so, so I was like, I hope that I'm not asking Sunny to come on and discuss a movie. And she's like, actually, I think it was garbage.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to hear both the 70 and the 30 like versus dislike. So, okay, this is your spoiler alert, folks. If you haven't seen Clovehitch, go check it out. Come back and hear what we have to say.
You are the best young lady that he has brought home to meet us.
Also the only one.
Dad.
Knot tying exemplifies the strength of a troop or family.
How come Dad doesn't have to help with couponing?
Because your father has his own hobbies.
You know about that Clovehitch stuff, right?
10 official victims. No fingerprints, no blood. Just the Clovehitch tied to every victim's house.
I've been meaning to talk to you. You know we're made in God's image. But men like you and me, we got thoughts.
I don't think he stopped killing. I think there's more than 10 victims.
You can't control what pops into your head, right?
He has pictures.
I mean, what if a thought popped into your head right now? A bad thought.
Does that look like your father's handwriting?
Something like grabbing one of these tools and wham! There. Awkward talk with Dad. Over.
You think your dad is Clovehitch?
I don't know. Something's going on. Something bad.
He's insane.
It's my dad.
Oh, no!
Maybe you don't know what a normal dad is like.
She's manipulating you.
we going?
Almost there, bud.
"16-year-old Tyler Burnside lives with his Christian family in a small Kentucky town. The town and its residents are haunted by the memory of the Clovehitch Killer, an infamous serial killer who bound and strangled 10 known female victims before disappearing 10 years earlier. One night, Tyler takes his father's truck to see a girl who finds a bondage photograph between the seats. When word of the photo spreads among teenagers in Tyler's church and scout troop, they ostracize him, believing him to be a BDSM fetishist. Tyler, meanwhile, begins to wonder if his father, family man and community leader Don Burnside, has a connection to the Clovehitch Killer. Investigating Don's private shed, Tyler finds a hidden compartment containing bondage magazines along with a Polaroid photo of a beaten and bound woman. Suspecting his father might be the killer, Tyler approaches Cassie, an outcast and amateur Clovehitch historian, and asks for help. They link the photo to a known Clovehitch victim and later uncover blueprints of a BDSM dungeon in the shed. Exploring his house's crawl space, Tyler finds a box containing the driver's license of 10 Clovehitch victims and 3 other women, as well as more Polaroid photos of beaten and bound women. Dawn, now suspicious of Tyler's behavior, takes him camping. To explain the evidence Tyler had uncovered, Dawn says that the Clovehitch Killer was Tyler's vegetative uncle Rudy, who became paralyzed after the guilt drove him to a suicide attempt. Dawn says he kept the evidence in hopes of one day giving it to the victims' families. Tyler accepts the explanation and the two burn all the evidence. Tyler ends the investigation, although Cassie remains unsatisfied with Dawn's story. Uncharacteristically, Dawn allows Tyler to attend a scout leadership camp, something he'd previously claimed the family had no money for. He then sends his wife and daughter to his in-laws for 2 weeks. Home alone, he attempts to recreate the burned photographs by taking pictures of himself cross-dressing in bondage positions. Unsatisfied, he angrily throws the photos away. Cassie briefly stops by looking for Tyler, but receives a call on her cell phone and leaves. Dawn then stalks a woman to her home. He breaks in when she sleeps, binds her, and begins strangling her. However, Tyler appears in the house with a rifle. A flashback reveals that Tyler never left for camp, but instead was tailing Dawn with Cassie. It is also revealed that Cassie's mother was one of the 3 unknown Clovehitch victims. Tyler confronts his father and tries to talk him into giving himself up. Dawn claims that they are having an affair with his wife's knowledge. Meanwhile, Cassie tries to help the bound woman, but Dawn knocks her out. Dawn then convinces Tyler to hand over the gun. Dawn tries to shoot Tyler, only to find the gun unloaded. As the two scuffle, Cassie awakens and knocks Dawn unconscious. Cassie begins to dial 911, but Tyler stops her. Later, Dawn has been declared missing. The family is informed by the police that Dawn's body has been found and his death ruled a suicide. At their church, Tyler delivers a eulogy for Dawn, intercut with flashbacks of him and Cassie dragging an unconscious Dawn into the forest to stage his death. Dawn slowly wakes up to Tyler pointing a pistol at his head. Tyler ends the eulogy with, "Dad, if you can hear me, I love you." All right. So another thing I did not realize when I went into this movie is that this is basically a BTK story. Dawn is basically modeled after Dennis Rader, who was the BTK killer. He was a family man. He was a scout leader, all of those things. And so because you are our true crime expert, I was hoping that you would give us a little bit of BTK history and tell us the parallels that you saw in this movie with his real life.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're not familiar, BTK stands for bind, torture, and kill, which was obviously the MO of serial killer Dennis Rader. So Dennis Rader was his name. So he murdered for about 17 years in Wichita and Park City, Kansas, and he was finally arrested in 2005. So he had a pretty long record. His confirmed number of victims is 10, although some people think it could be more. But those 10 include 2 children. So he held very sadistic fantasies while playing an active role in society as this God-fearing father and husband. He was a Boy Scout troop leader, a compliance officer, president of his local church council. He wore the mask very well for a very long time. So, and his ability to lead this double life has been sort of the subject of a lot of criminologists, because studying this persona of how you could possibly balance both was just baffling at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's arguably, I would say, probably the most terrifying element of his persona, the ability, again, to wear these 2 masks. And I think we see a lot of this represented in the film. And I think a lot of those things align pretty closely to the real life of Dennis Rader, BTK. BTK stalked his victims in an attempt to study their schedules and their patterns, access points to their house, who they lived with, if they had a dog. That was a really big one for him, and so on. And he kind of he would really bide his time. He was, I have to choose my words carefully. I don't want to say he was very patient, but he was. He would wait for the right time to strike and catch his victims off guard in their own homes. And that's normally where he perpetrated his crimes, was in his victims' homes, which is a pretty, again, got to choose my words carefully, but for lack of a better term, a gutsy move for a person doing the things that he did. But again, cornered, captured them in their own home. He, again, it aligns pretty closely with what he did in the film. Once he was in the home, he would come up with some sort of phony story about how he was a fugitive looking, for a car and some money. And, once he got what he needed, he would be out of your way. And he was actually quoted saying at one point that if he could instill this false sense of security in his victims, he had already won. Because once he could get them home and keep them, reassured, he had them, in his words, right where he wanted them. So
they would just go along to hoping he would leave.
Thinking that, if I do everything that he says, everything's going to be okay. And I would argue, and I'm sure other people would agree, that I think that this also was a big part of his, sadistic nature. I think he enjoyed creating a false air of, everything will be fine, and then surprising them with what was, going to happen next. So, usually this led into the binding, right? Hey, I need your car, I need money, but I have to tie you up to make sure you don't call the police and you don't go anywhere. So then, unfortunately, obviously the next part of this is torture. So whether it was mental gymnastics he was playing with his victim or physically torturing them, that's what he would do. And we can get into this when we talk more, but I think one God element that he held, especially in his practice, was this suspension between life and death. He was known for the torture aspect, choking his victims, releasing, letting them think that they were going to be okay, or maybe coming out of it thinking, something else, would interfere and save them. But he played, again, back and forth between again, life and death, and until finally, the K portion, bind, torture, kill, he would eventually strangle his victims to death. So again, extremely sadistic, crazy, because he would really take his time in his victims' own homes doing this to them. And rarely did he bring anything with him to commit these crimes. A lot of times he would either use what was there, maybe bring some sort of tourniquet with him. But for a person who got away with these crimes that he committed for as long as he did, again, I think can be attributed to his dual personality and his ability to kind of function on both sides of the fence, right? Again, it didn't stop there. I think he utilized that. I think in a way, that was part of the game. He liked to establish that psychological dominance, through, this calm demeanor, through deceit, and then, do what he was there to do. So again, there are a lot of parallels. This film, for me, I knew what I was watching right away. Even if you hadn't told me, I was okay. Even down to Don's look, they nailed
Yeah.
it pretty closely. The story of the son is definitely like, another element to this that I'm not 100% sure is true. I do know that, and we can talk about it more later, but there was a little bit of a rift between, the real BTK or Dennis Rader and his son. At times, I think he actually got physical with his son, but all in all, he was highly respected, if not like an absolute control freak within his family unit, but still viewed as a, again, a God-fearing Boy Scout troop leading, functional member of society. So it's a very, very interesting character. And like I said, I think the film captured that aspect of it really, really well.
Yeah. And I think, I guess that's kind of sort of what sets BTK apart from some of the other serial killers that we all know of. Some of them had families, but it seems like he was sort of all in on family and all in on this other life. So like you said, this double life is really kind of like an anomaly with these types of people. But to me, I think all of the stuff that we do see of Dawn being this freak, for lack of a better term, is all interesting and disturbing. But to me, the most interesting thing about this movie was all the family stuff and watching Don be a regular guy. I think that is what really compelled me to like think about this movie more. And that just leads me right into the religious aspect of it. Pardon me if I ramble on a bit, but I was just like, I was thinking about it and I was like, okay, what is it about this that's like disturbing me other than the fact that it's just a double life? Like specifically, what is it about like the church thing that disturbs me? And so when I first saw the Boy Scouts, this is a little bit different than your regular Boy Scouts. This is like this troop is like specifically tied to the church and it's happening at the church and like during church services and stuff. There's like an overlap. And that made me think of an organization called the Royal Rangers. Have you heard of the Royal Rangers?
No, I haven't.
So the Royal Rangers and the Missionettes are the Assembly of God versions of the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts.
Oh, wow.
And I know this because I did it when I was a kid. Oh. My dad was a Royal Rangers troop leader.
Wow.
And the man had a Tom Selleck mustache in the 90s.
Oh my
god! That cracked me up. I was like, oh, it kind of looks like my dad. Anyway, there were no shenanigans, no traumatic things. I had a great time in Missionettes, but I was like, oh my gosh, it's the Royal Rangers, and I could not, for the life of me, figure out. I went down a rabbit hole with both the writer and the director, and I cannot figure out if either of them were ever in Royal Rangers, but I believe it to be true. Also, because at the end, when Tyler gets his little Order of the Light sash, the emblem on it is a compass, and the Royal Rangers logo is a compass.
Interesting.
So, yeah. Okay. So there's that. I was like hooked once I was like, this is Royal Rangers. But beyond that, I think the church culture in this movie is very familiar to me. And there's definitely a lot of like toxic religious culture happening here where Tyler and all his like little youth group friends are just stuck in this like little bubble, right? Like his curly head friend, when they see Cassie across the parking lot, he's like, she's not Christian, and like, how dare you like speak to this person who doesn't go to our church? She's not a Christian, and just that kind of stuff. And I think what is like disturbing about all of that to me is faith and religious principles are real and they have a lot of value. There are a lot of people like myself who have reevaluated our faith without losing it, so I don't want to make light of the very real moral, social principles you find at church and the value of having like genuine faith, right? However, specifically in the evangelical church, I've seen this willingness to put this kind of like moral sheen just coated over everything. And as long as you like look right, you say the right words, you vote for the right group, you're considered good. And as long as you sort of like toe the party line in this church culture, it's all good. But the minute you ask a question or point out a problem or get really honest or have even a speck of doubt, people just disengage. You just watch the light in their eyes go out. So I feel like Don in this movie is just a perfect example of that. This man looks really good on the outside. He's doing all the right things. He's saying all the right things. And therefore, he just flies completely under the radar in this culture.
Do you think that we're supposed to believe that this is genuine, or do you does this duality exist? Because two things can be true at once, or do you think it's more an outlet and something that he can use to easily manipulate those around him?
That is a great question, because it does seem like he really loves his family, you know? And I will say the family in this movie is really interesting to me because, like, he and his wife, their moments together feel genuine to me. They even have that moment in bed where he has a performance issue, and it's not like a moment of like strife or frustration. It's just, she's very understanding and is like, is there anything I can do? Are you okay? Like, so, you know, the thing with him and Tyler aside, because their relationship is a little bit strained, but also Tyler is like becoming a man, and you often see relationships get complicated with your parents when you hit that age. So all the weirdness aside, like the weird conversations we see them have, he does seem to actually enjoy his family. So I don't know, like maybe for Don, it is a complicated thing. Maybe he would like to be the man he portrays, but he's got, of course, this dark secret, you know, that he's tried to give it up and he can't do it. You know, he can't do it.
I think that's a fair assumption. And I mean, if we're going to draw parallels, I think BTK in real life too. I mean, even when he went to prison, he, let everybody know that he still considered himself a Christian. This is after he had already been convicted, tried. So, he had nothing to gain, I guess, is my point. Maybe. I've never been in that position. Maybe there is something to gain, when you're playing the long game in that regard. But yeah, I mean, I'm kind of in the same camp where I think it was and that to me is even more just perplexing that again, these two things can be true at once. And, maybe, again, just like how people are drawn to certain things, based on their life experiences. I think the same sometimes can be said about religion, or if you have something, really impacting happen in your life, you're drawn to religion as a way to like come to terms or understand, grieve, whatever it may be. And maybe for him, like maybe he actually in a weird way took solace in religion, but you can't help but notice that there are also some power dynamics happening within the faith. Like he establishes himself as like this leader, and it's not him just like getting spiritual fulfillment by attending. Now he's got to be like on the council. He's got to be the, involved in the troop as like a leader. And, so I don't know. That's tough, it's tough to say.
Yeah. That's a great question though. And that's not something I had really considered, but I think especially in this movie, that might be one of the reasons why it is compelling to watch Don. Of course, Dylan McDermott is fantastic in this role, so he makes it easy to watch this character. But that duality and that like not being sure, I think is part of the secret sauce of this story. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah.
Okay, so this story is like pretty straightforward. And I thought once Tyler sort of suspected that his dad was Clovehitch, that was pretty early on. So I'm thinking I've got my film hat on and I'm like, oh, well, if we think that he's Clovehitch, he's not going to be, right? That's too easy. So I really thought at the beginning, I thought it was Uncle Rudy. I was like, oh, well, they're trying to make us think that it was Don, but I bet it's going to be Uncle Rudy. And then, of course, that very quickly is like debunked. So did you think, well, you probably did because of your history with BTK, you probably thought that Don was Clovehitch, right?
some confirmation bias here, but see, for me, if I didn't know that, my film hat would be telling me Uncle Rudy looks kind of creepy. Like, I think we're supposed to think it's him. Like, they purposely made him. That's actually an interesting point too. Again, when we're judging based on like appearance and action, here you have somebody who would fit this, very traditional, like even cliche version, right, of like a scary serial killer, right? He's very quiet. I forget, was it a car accident? Or
yes,
something that had happened to him. Yeah. Yeah, and you're like, oh, like you said, it's definitely got to be this guy. And when I see something like that, I'm like, it's the opposite. It has to be the opposite. But again, I can't say that in all fairness because, of my nerdy affiliation with.
Yeah. Well, and at first, like when he first mentioned, because he's like, oh, I'm going to be late. I got to pick Rudy up. I'm going to be late. And so when we get there and we see that he's in a wheelchair, I was like, oh, this is just another thing trying to show us that like Don, he's also taking care of his like invalid brother and driving him to church on Sunday, But then when he mentioned that he had been in a wheelchair for 10 years and in the opening line, they tell us it's been 10 years. I was like, are we supposed to be looking at Dawn and then over here it's Rudy? But I think there's also more interesting stuff going on with Rudy. And I did not think about this until a second watch. But okay, so he tells Tyler in the woods, I used to look at those pictures and so did your Uncle Rudy. But he was into it way more than me. And I told him we needed to stop. And I told him he needed to turn himself in and he tried to commit suicide. I'm like, wait a minute. Are you telling the story backwards? Was it the other way around? What did Rudy tell you to turn yourself in and you staged his accident? Like, do we think this is possible? Yeah. Am I reaching?
No, I think you're right on. I didn't even think about the staging portion of it. Isn't it convenient that Rudy can't speak? And I feel like it operates. I don't know. And now that you're saying it, I feel like I can verbalize it a little bit better. But Rudy just seems like he knows something throughout the entire film. Like he has this aura about him that's just it feels like he's watching in a way that to me says like I know, but also he also obviously feels or looks very defeated. Yeah, Nicole. Like I think you're right. Like I think it definitely happened the other way around, but I never considered that Dawn could be responsible for the state that Rudy is in an attempt to keep him quiet.
Yeah. And of course, we don't need the story to be that. I mean, Uncle Rudy could just have had a car accident, but it's like a perfect out for Dawn. And also, I think a lot of time people who are like narcissists or pathological liars, they accuse people of things that they themselves are guilty of.
Yes.
And so that was another thing that I thought, oh no, he's just twisting this thing that's true about himself and deflecting it onto someone else. Also, that whole scene in the woods, we briefly chatted about this, was so unsettling.
Yeah, that was probably probably the most unnerving part of the film for me. Yeah,
because it's the first time they address it like head on. What's happening, and we're just. I mean, I didn't think Dawn was going to kill him, but I wasn't 100% sure what we were going to see.
Weren't they cleaning their guns? At the site, yeah, which to me was great foreshadowing, knowing now. But yeah, same way. And I can't remember exactly what Dawn said, but the language that he used, like how you talk about narcissistic personalities, and again we talk about extreme personalities, like that pop up in true crime. A lot of these guys are psychopathic or antisocial. Have some tendency to be on like the psychopathic like spectrum, and the way that he, I don't know, just put Tyler through these like mental gymnastics and to hear him justify something. And like you said, like, I think he actually put something back on Tyler a little bit. And then sort of attempts to explain it away. And I'm like, how convenient that you put the responsibility on someone who can't even speak to.
Yes.
It just,
what he says is, he says to Tyler, He says the lack of respect is really disturbing, Tyler.
Yes. Oh my God. That was it. I'm like, holy crap.
I'm like, your son found evidence that you murdered 10 people.
Mm-hmm.
And you find the lack of respect disturbing?
Yes. And the fact that he used the word disturbing too, I'm just like, wow.
Yes.
That was, I don't know why that felt so triggering, but I think it just like, it reminds you of every instance of being like gaslit or you just, I don't know. I mean, we have the privilege of being like a third, like all seeing, party, but still, that was something that I just could not shake. I'm so glad you found that quote. That was it.
Yeah. Yeah, I noted that. I was like, oh, the nerve. So I'm going to switch up the order of our discussion a little bit here because we're already talking about this conversation. We're talking about Tyler. So one of the biggest criticisms I found for this film was that people just couldn't believe how naive Tyler was in this movie and that his dad was always able to like squirm out of like what is clearly happening. I have my own thoughts about that, but did you find Tyler's manipulation like frustrating or relatable?
I mean, I think it was frustrating, but I think it had a purpose. I think it was trying to show how badly the son wanted things to be normal and to be okay. And I think that is a direct connect of the religious upbringing, the squeaky clean, Boy Scout, Christian upbringing, like all of that. I think there is just such a drive and, need for normalcy, like, thinking, because think about what he actually found and saw. That is the furthest extreme from, what he deals with on a day-to-day basis, what he believes, what his morals and values are, and then what his father portrays are his morals and values. So seeing something like that, I can't even imagine what must have gone through his mind. And again, being a true crime junkie, you hear it from people all the time, and that is kind of the result of being manipulated by a highly effective person, especially when it's a family member, right? Like you live your whole life with this person, the last thing that you think they would be capable of is murder. So yes, for me, it was frustrating, but again, like, I could see, I personally see, like, again, even from a realistic standpoint, how that could happen.
I totally agree. And like in the moment on my first viewing, yes, I was like, oh my gosh, like I can't believe you're letting him do this to you. But I mean, he is 16 years old. I have been manipulated at jobs in my 20s and my early 30s where like I knew something was happening. I should have spoken up for myself and I didn't. And this is in a low stakes scenario. Right. So, I don't fault a 16-year-old. He also he can't go to anyone. Right. Like he's not going to go to his mom about this until he's sure, I think it would be very difficult for him to continue to stand up to his dad, somebody he respects. Also, to go back to the church culture thing, again, in evangelical settings, you're taught from day one to disregard your own emotions and your own thoughts in a lot of cases. You're taught that like as humans, we're weak. And if we, follow our own understanding, so to speak, we may become lost. And I think this is also why you see some churches morphing into these like full blown cults, because you can't ever question or doubt what is put forth by authority. And so Tyler, again, is so young that he hasn't even had time to explore, being a fully realized person. And so to have not only an authority figure, but the person he probably respects and admires more than anyone else tell him this. I mean, to me, I think it's just a lot to expect him to overcome that.
Absolutely. And I mean, and then you have, someone like Cassie in the film who is like the conspiracy theorist, like catalyst, right? Like she questions everything and makes us think of a different light. He even goes to her at one point and says, hey, I think the Clovehitch Killer is my dad. And she laughs at him.
Yeah, she's like, it's not your dad.
Yeah. So it's kind of like, it's a very interesting moment where even she doesn't, suspect or think it. And this is a person who's, made it their hobby quite literally, to investigate these things and has questioned quite literally everybody else. But when he comes up, it's, no, couldn't possibly be. So I thought that was interesting too.
I was totally crestfallen, though, when they did burn all of the evidence.
Yeah.
I was like, no.
Says, I wanted to turn it into the police one day, but let's go ahead and just get rid of it. Yeah. And the son helps.
Yeah.
It's wild.
Yes. And I think it was his suggestion. I think he said, we have to get rid of it. I was like, oh, Tyler, don't say that. Don't let him off the hook.
Yeah. But again, that could be, another way to attribute how normal he wanted his life to be, how much he didn't want this to be his dad, didn't want to find it, didn't want to think about it, didn't want to see it, didn't want it to come up again. And again, I think that if nothing else, I think that was kind of his role in this film, was to really kind of underline, how normalcy is kind of used as like a blanket of protection, when in reality, there's a lot of truth that we don't want to or cannot handle facing, depending on, how we grew up. And I think it's pretty clear how he grows up based on the beginning of the film. So.
Yeah. And it's, it's really kind of tragic too, because Tyler does seem like a good kid, he seems like he doesn't get in trouble, and he's really interested in advancing in his scout troop. And I think he wants to be like an Air Force pilot. Like, they don't explicitly say that, but there's little things here and there. So he's like true blue kid. And it seems like he's genuinely that way. He's like sneaking out to like make out with his church girlfriend, but it's real innocent, so it is like, it's even more tragic that he is like trying to be a good kid and like do all the right things, and he has to deal with this just unimaginable situation. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about the specifics of Creepy Dawn. I had a thought about the torture basement. So Cassie and Tyler, they find this blueprint. Dawn has moved all his stuff, all his Polaroids and his magazines out of the hidey hole, but they find a blueprint for this torture basement that looks very similar to like a Gacy situation to me, but there's all these very specific ways he wants to like put people in this maze, for lack of a better word. So this does not matter to the plot or the story, but it's just a thought I had. Do we think he actually like fully built this torture basement, or was it like he planned to do it and he hasn't gotten there yet? What do you think?
I will tell you, I can't speak for the character of Dawn, but BTK, he actually had he had a series of like projects, within his fantasy life, right? But his biggest passion project was something called the Silo of Terror. So it wasn't a basement, but it was a silo. And this was
wow.
And actually what's interesting is before this, our talk, actually look this up to kind of verify a few things. And this has come up again recently, when searching for, a potential victim of it, even in I think they reopened this in 2023, and it's based on drawings that he made of this silo. Where this came from was when he was a little boy, and this is him, I think, speaking to a journalist, but he told the journalist, we'd play cowboys and Indians, and some of us would be captured. Again, they lived on this farmland. When they were captured, they would bring him into this silo, tie him up, which, he admits later he got excited from it. And he said, you would feel very alone in this very desolate, dark place. And when you would look up in the silo, all you could see was this little like view of sky far above everything else. And I think there's something interesting with that too, in terms of religion. We can revisit that. So this was something that, really impacted him early on in his childhood and stayed with him. And they have actually found sketches of his silo of terror where he's built out like a torture wheel. He's got plans for like a train track running next to it, because that was like another one of his fantasies was, putting a woman on a train track and then, letting the train do its thing.
Wow.
Yeah, crazy stuff. But what's interesting is some of the drawings, because he liked to draw a lot. This is how he would relive a lot of his fantasies. In addition to the photographs, did a ton of drawings, and a lot of them are women in barns, and they have very specific backgrounds. And obviously these barns are very close to these silos, because if you look at that landscape, especially then, you see a barn, there's usually a silo next to it. So they actually are wondering whether or not some of his crimes were perpetrated in these barns, and he was working on making this silo of terror like a reality. And there's references, I think, in some of his writings to a hidey hole, is what he called it, where he would keep a lot of his like trophies, personal effects, like things like of that nature. So another, thing in the film that's very, close to reality is, yes, it just wasn't a basement. It was a silo, which is even creepier somehow to me.
Yeah, that's very specific.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems to me like in this movie, because Tyler, we don't see him explore like every inch of the crawl space, but I feel like maybe, Don and Rudy got started on this project, and then, he got married, had kids, paused. So I don't know. I just had a feeling that this blueprint of his was like the grand plan. But I feel like we hadn't seen it fully realized. I guess the reason why I fixated on that is because that is also very disturbing to me, that like we're seeing his plan. If he could do what he wanted, this would be it, And also just Tyler being in, like finding that and going in there. I was so nervous for him. I was like, what is this baby going to find?
Right.
Like, ooh.
And being trapped in this small space and one way in.
Yes.
Yeah, it's pretty bizarre. And like I said, it's so interesting because you said this film came out in 2018, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting to me that, you kind of described it in this way. And now fast forward to 2023 in real life, they are looking at these drawings again and are now thinking, okay, this may have moved past fantasy and may have some legs, unfortunately, in the real world. So it's interesting you brought that up, because like I said, maybe coming back up again.
It'll be wild if they find evidence of that somewhere.
For sure.
What about some other disturbing moments? What other things about creepy Dawn upset you?
Well, we kind of went over the woods scene. To me, that was probably one of the most disturbing. One of my favorite scenes, I feel so weird saying favorite because, one of the most interesting scenes to me was when he's left at home alone. And he's trying to recreate those victim photos, which, again, was another thing BTK did. Not so much like the action of that, but the frustration that he experienced when he could not capture the look and feel that he was going.
Yes.
And it's like, well, duh, like you're motivated by something that, is not easy to achieve and still be alive. You cannot fake that type of thrill, in his eyes anyway. But seeing him, like how he reacted in that moment, just throwing a temper tantrum, like in lingerie, just sprawled out on this bed. I was like, this is where we get a real glimpse of this person. No one else is around. He believes he's completely alone, which was also very disturbing to know that Tyler was under the bed the entire time this was happening.
Yes.
To me, that was like one of my favorite moments. And again, I think it's because we kind of turned the lights on, at one point and really saw him for who he was.
Yep. The mask is off.
Yep.
I mean, completely off.
Yeah.
I felt the same way. Like once he sends his family off, which even that like breakfast scene when we know Tyler is gone and he's like, oh, why don't you go visit your mom?
Thoughtful, considerate man. Yeah.
Yes. And like one of the things I think Dylan McDermott does really well in this movie is like, he's got this smile. He's always smiling and he's always happy dad and happy scout leader. And the minute they're gone, when he goes up to the basement to get out his old dusty, trusty Polaroid, I mean, he's not smiling.
Yeah.
It's all business.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't see him smile again until Cassie shows up and he's got to put his happy dad face back on. So all of that stuff, just being with him, running his errands, taking his Polaroids, getting his stuff together. Yeah. Trying the stuff on. I mean, all of that is, it is like captivating because you do feel like we're finally seeing who this person is when he thinks no one is watching. And I also really love the shot. Once he realizes he cannot achieve what he wants, taking Polaroids of himself, and he's decided he's going to do this thing. We see him and Rudy at church, and he looks very serious. Then it cuts to a scene of him overseeing like a scout meeting, and he's very serious. And the next scene, he's sitting on the bed, and it's an overhead shot, and all of his stuff, his ropes and his materials are neatly organized in like a perfect flat lay behind him. And that little montage of church, scout meeting, torture devices on the bed, chef's kiss, like perfectly executed.
Yeah, it's that alone probably could have been a trailer for the movie, because you're just seeing every aspect of that personality. And what's crazy too is like when you do see, him in that moment with the Polaroids and whatnot, you're kind of, I feel like, again, unless you really know the story of BTK, watching this with fresh eyes, you're kind of like waiting for that moment of like, okay, like this is what makes him switch. And that doesn't happen. He just is, and then he isn't, like one moment to the next. And to me, again, we always want to try to put a face to the fear or a name to it, or understand the why. And with something like this, again, that's something this movie does really well. There's not always a great reason. Sometimes people are just, really have that duality, sometimes like, again, two things can be true. And you are left feeling very unsatisfied, not knowing where that switch happens. You just see him go, like you said, from one scene, quite literally, to the next in his life without any explanation.
Yeah, it's great. It's a great moment. And from that point on, I would say from that shot of the bed kind of on, we're in basically the last third, like the end of the movie. And this was another kind of big area of criticism that I saw when I was kind of combing people's reviews, was like the ending in general. So how did you feel about the ending?
I think it served a purpose, but I bought almost everything in the movie until the ending. And I think that's where my 30% fell. And from like the victim in the home, like whatever happened there, all the way to two teenagers dragging this heavy man out into the middle of the woods in the middle of the day. And not only that, but Tyler now has to commit this act, or chooses to commit this act. And I do think that, like, again, the purpose of the film was to really point out that, again, I think Tyler was kind of like the catalyst for all this, right? Tyler wanted so badly for things to be normal, stay normal. He was willing to take on, I guess the responsibility of ending his father's life so that he could maintain normalcy, not only for like his community, but his family. And I don't know, like, I don't really know what that says, whether that's a good thing or an admirable thing, or if it's just underlining everything that is wrong in this film to begin with. But I will say, like, for me, that was kind of a big plot hole, like regardless of intention. But I don't know. What did you think?
I have mixed thoughts about the ending because we kind of get two endings.
Yeah.
So I do love the way they shot the last third of this movie, where we're with Dawn. We think Tyler's gone. And then Tyler shows up unexpectedly. Loved that moment. I mean, was so relieved and was like, he's finally doing it. Like, he's finally taking a stand. And I love that it stops there and goes back and shows us what Tyler's been doing for the last few days. So that type of storytelling, I think, was perfect. I think was like pitch perfect for this movie. And even the fact that Dawn is able to get the gun from Tyler, again, is very frustrating. But it's like, okay, he's not quite, he's almost there. He's almost there. But his dad still has this like power over him. Of course, then we find out, well, the gun wasn't loaded anyway. So he couldn't have shot him anyway, right? The gun's not loaded.
Right.
What I would have preferred, and I don't know the best way to do this, but I like that he and Cassie overcome. I definitely did not want to see Tyler or Cassie get killed.
Right.
I assume the woman who was bound, I don't think she was dead. I think she was unconscious.
Which, yeah, okay.
I mean, I don't know. They don't tell us, right?
Right.
But either way, if she's unconscious, she was out before any of this occurred. And Dawn had told her, I have your picture. If you tell anybody about this, my friends are going to come get you. So even if she wakes up and her room is in disarray, I mean, I assume she's not going to go to the police, right? However, I would have preferred the ending to be a little bit more ambiguous, that Dawn is just missing, or we find out that Dawn had a gun accident in the woods, but we don't know exactly what happened. I think going that step farther to show that like Tyler and Cassie made it look like he had a gun cleaning accident, that to me is unbelievable. Like that now feels unattainable. Like you said, like how'd they get him out there? How does this 16-year-old kid, he knows how to use a gun. Right. That does not mean he knows how to stage a suicide. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. Staging is whether again, this comes up a lot in true crime. It's not easy, you know, and there's a lot of things that have to go right for it to look convincing.
And also, this is not a situation. I mean, Dawn is a pillar of the community. So it's not a situation where Dawn's a lowlife and the cops aren't going to really look into it.
Exactly.
I refuse to believe that the cops are going to leave any stone unturned. You know, they're going to do I would think everything they can. If there's any skepticism at all, they're going to be looking into it. Hey, this looks a little fishy.
Yeah.
You know?
Exactly. And also, I mean, Dawn didn't really exhibit any any personal struggles when it came to like depression or, any suicidal tendencies or thoughts, like quite the opposite, So yes, I feel like there would be an investigation, which also again, like kind of speaks to Tyler's naivety. But that if he were to be found out, what kind of damage that would do. Now he's sort of just piled on top of, one loss. And I mean, for his family to come to grips with that reality would be 10 times harder. So I don't know. Again, like I understand, I guess, the direction that they were taking, but I'm with you. I wish it was a little bit more ambiguous so that it didn't allow me to scrutinize the detail of the cover up,
The crime scene at the woman's house and the crime scene in the woods was one too many crime scenes, I could forgive some messiness and some plot holes in one or the other and still feel like they hammered it home,
Right.
But yeah, the hat on a hat was just a little bit too much for me.
And again, like I want to say the victim was just knocked out. So I guess I don't think that she would have seen Tyler and Cassie enter, but I would imagine she would wake up at some point, and I don't know, like you said, maybe she was too scared to say anything. But again, I feel like that comes up a lot, in these stories where, someone is sworn to secrecy and very rarely do they not go to the police or say anything.
Right.
So yeah, that was a little iffy for me as well.
Yeah. I did like, though, overall, like what the ending of the movie is trying to say. And even, again, the mom, I should really know her name, but I don't. But the mom, whenever she's trying to tell Tyler that they found your dad, they don't think it was an accident. And she's trying to tell her son that his dad committed suicide. And she makes a comment. She says, he had his problems, but we always worked through it together. And it just made me wonder, like, what is she talking about? Is she talking about problems like every married couple would say? I mean, I don't know that I would say that about my husband if he died tomorrow. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm like, does she kind of know a little that there's a little something off with him,
So in, again, back to the real world BTK, when he has his, his cross-dressing moment, his wife actually finds him in that state and they do through it. And somehow he talks his way out of it. And in fact, she's with him until the very end when he's arrested. So that is a really interesting point. Like maybe there was a time that, she found something. So I can't imagine if 16-year-old son found something that his wife wouldn't, and again, maybe there's this willing suspension of disbelief where you're just like, no, I just want to get through my day. Like, we all falter, we all sin, we all stumble, but at the end of the day, we get through it as a family, and
yeah.
Again, I think I'm so glad you brought up a lot of those, like, I don't know, I guess just those little moments that happen where they're kind of implying, a little bit more lore, than maybe we're privy to, but it definitely feels like some good, like, foreshadowing or, some hindsight there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think also just the fact that when Tyler is at his ceremony to be coronated by the Order of the Light, which I just love that that's what it's called, by the way. I'm like, we're not being subtle, but I love it. Like, you have overcome, Tyler. You've been indoctrinated into the Order of the Light. You've been crowned into the Order of the Light. But anyway, I just love that he just went through this ordeal, finding out that his dad is not a good dad, not a good person. And yet at his little coronation, I mean, it's also a memorial for his dad. And he chooses to say good things about his dad. And the very last line of the film is, "Dad, I love you." Yeah. And I was just like, there's just so much complicated stuff going on in this movie. And I really think that even though it was, hinged on the BTK story, and that's like the fascinating thing, it's really about Tyler and like his journey, right, and what he's going to do with these, because he is us, right. We're putting ourselves in his position and we're like, my gosh, what would I do? And I think that's the real kind of value and like challenge in this movie. So I love that it ends with him kind of choosing grace, but also, even though Dawn is gone, and that's better for everyone, he's left a lot of damage in his wake. Things are not just going to be fine tomorrow. Right. Clearly the mom and the daughter are struggling because mom's got to go back to work, and the daughter's like, I want dad's pancakes. And like, Tyler's done this, has had to like sort of be a man and take care of his family and his community, and he can't talk to anybody about it. It's just, so Dawn has left a lot of damage in his wake. And I think that's another reason why this movie it ends on this hopeful, but yet like dour note. And again, I love that about it.
Yeah, no, it's great. And, I mean, I guess going back to the complication of like, what would I do if I were in this position? I just listened to a true crime episode where a mother actually was, I'm trying to remember the nature of the crime. I think he actually attacked his mother and father in bed, a son, and murdered the father. The mother lived, and I don't think he was expecting that. She pointed him out initially to the police and said, yes, this is the person that did it. When she came to and healed, she actually pulled back, said that she didn't remember. And a lot of people think that she was protecting her son. So even her bearing witness to something so horrible and being a victim of it herself, she still wanted to protect her son. And I think, again, there is something to be said about that. Even though we're, in this film, like, you don't have to necessarily, dance that close to the truth. I think there's a lot of truth in that again, the lengths and mental gymnastics that you will go through to convince yourself that this is not, and maybe you're not even convincing yourself. You just cannot believe that a person that you love and have been, this close to all of your life would do something so horrible. And again, I think that's just a testament to that, even to the point I would say to where he would kill for it. I mean, it seems extremely out of character, but maybe not. I don't know, and maybe are they implying that, he's got similar DNA in that regard? Is there some like, even, in that regard? I don't know, but I feel that, like you said, it's very true to say, I don't know how I would handle myself in that situation. And grief looks different for everybody, how they cope with, things like this, very drastically. We can all say that in hindsight, but like we were talking about in the beginning, right? Unless like you've actually gone through some of this personally, maybe it doesn't impact you in the same way. I don't know. So
Well, we've talked about, I think, pretty much everything we need to talk about. So it's time for final thoughts. So if there's anything we haven't covered yet, feel free to touch on it. And just sort of give me your overall final thoughts for Clovehitch.
All in all, I thought it was a really solid movie. Again, I loved the parallels. I loved more so like the underlying theme of, again, this duality at play here. The function of like, religion in that aspect. I do kind of wish I would have seen, I don't want to say I wish I would have seen Dawn like act out these crimes, but I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of like the psychological or criminal profile, because we see so much of the opposite. And for me, like, I don't know, I think maybe that's just me. I maybe wanted it to be a little bit scarier. But the scary factor is buried in that reality where, somebody like this could be your neighbor, or a family member. That's the scary part. So maybe that's enough. I don't know. But all in all, I really enjoyed it, and I loved the slow burn factor. And yes, that ending, how they shot it, and then having, again, it's duality is like the buzzword for this film, right? Even like how they shot it. I think that was a really good choice.
I feel a lot the same. Like I said, I've had this movie on my list for a couple of years now, just because I thought it was an interesting premise. I did not know religion was going to come into play at all. So I was just so pleasantly surprised to see some of my own experiences like mirrored in this movie. Like even the songs they're singing during worship, I'm like, oh yes, like I feel I'm right at home, But I think this is a really well crafted movie. I think, like you said, the tone is slow burn and unsettling, which is not everyone's jam, but it's my jam. Give me a moody, slow burn movie any day. And even though it's got like a pretty straightforward plot, I think it plays out in a really compelling way. You're not entirely sure what's going on. And when you do figure it out, you want to keep watching to see like, how is this going to be resolved? I think the cast is great. Like I've already mentioned Dylan McDermott a couple times, and just seeing him like, he's Hollywood hunk. So seeing him play a different role, I always love to see actors play against type. And I think he was really great in this movie at both the charming and the sort of disturbing side. Charlie Plummer is really believable as this good kid who doesn't know how to deal with something big. I also really like the mom and sister. We don't get a lot of them, but that whole family just feels really believable together. Samantha Mathis is the actress who plays the mom, and she's always great. Like we've been talking about, I think this movie has some really interesting things to say, not only about church culture, but this more broadly like wholesome American life and the secrets that are hiding inside our families and our neighbors and inside ourselves too. I think there is some introspection to be done here. It's not all outward. I think it does challenge us to look inside of ourselves and ask ourselves some questions, which is always a plus for me. And I know this movie has got its haters, and I do understand people's criticism. It just soars above all of that for me. It just really works for me. So The Clovehitch Killer, it's a movie I will definitely revisit, and I would definitely recommend it to any fan of true crime. So we've talked about true crime movies a little bit, but if people like Clovehitch Killer, do you have more recommendations for other media they should check out?
Yeah, if you want to dive more into the BTK story, specifically the duality, that we talked about in Clovehitch, a really great reference point is A Serial Killer's Daughter, which is written by Carrie Rawson, which is Dennis Rader, BTK's daughter. And it's a memoir, and it gives kind of like this really unique perspective of how Dennis Rader operated as this loving father and husband, and then the trauma that she experienced discovering, again, this alternate personality. So super good read, very informative. Also a documentary that is kind of close and explores that duality in a different way is I'll Be Gone in the Dark.
Yes.
It's about the Golden State Killer, but it's also about Michelle. Is it McNamara?
McNamara.
Thank you. But not only does it talk about, her investigation for the Golden State Killer, but it's a little bit of, a duality story for her as well, because it talks about what she's dealing with, the darker aspects of her own personality. So that was kind of an interesting, kind of an interesting alternative there, but
it's a good one.
My two recs kind of in this realm.
So I have some just like, cinematic stories and some documentaries. So right off the bat, there's a Netflix documentary called My Father, the BTK Killer. Mm-hmm. And it's basically the documentary based on the book that you're talking about. And I watched it several months ago. And yeah, I just found it really interesting that it was from her perspective. And that just like this movie, she's like, he was just my dad. We went fishing together. We did this and that. I had no idea, so it's a view into like that other side that we don't usually see in documentaries. And also she talks a lot about how she's gotten some shade for writing that book because it's this like Midwestern thing. Like you don't shame the family. Like you shouldn't be talking about this. Like, you should basically act like it didn't happen and move on. And by talking about it, you're making your family look bad. And I felt a little bit of that from Tyler, he's like, I don't like, no one can know. Don't call the cops. No one can know about this, So that's a good one to check out. Zodiac is my all-time favorite true crime movie, I think. David Fincher is, of course, a master at whatever he does. But Zodiac is just a beautiful movie, an interesting movie. John Carroll Lynch is in it, who I love. That's a great one. Nightcrawler is another great true crime movie. Very different than this movie. You're not following around a serial killer. It's Jake Gyllenhaal at his most unhinged. And that's all I'll say. Just check that out. Let's see. I'll recommend two more. There's a French movie that came out last year before called Red Rooms. It's a French Canadian. And it's also one of these slow burn, moody movies where you're not exactly sure what's happening. It does involve a man on trial for being a serial killer. And we follow this woman around. And you're not sure if she thinks he's guilty or not, but we're just sort of watching her live her life. And she has this presence on the dark web. And so she's going to this man's trial. She's on the dark web at night. And you're just really not sure what her aim is. But it's a very, very interesting movie. Kind of similar in tone to this one, even though it's a totally different story. And the last one I'll recommend is The Killer Inside Me, which came out in like 2010, I think. Casey Affleck plays this super sadistic serial killer in like 1940s Texas. And you're just with him and he's doing it and he tells you why he does it. And it's just like very unsettling, but again, just like really well made. And it feels strange to be following a serial killer like back in that time when everything's supposed to be apple pie and white picket fences and don't lock your doors, so that contrast is really interesting. So, Sunny, thanks again for joining me. This has been a great discussion.
Yeah, this has been super fun. Thanks for having me. And thanks for turning me on to Clovehitch. Honestly, I had no idea this film even existed, but I don't think it gets enough love. It was all in all a really fantastic one. I think so. Thanks for cluing me in.
Agree. Also, the director from Arkansas. So I appreciate that. I found that out after the fact. But yeah. So I know that you are a mom and that has, taken up a lot of your space. But you're still an artist. Do you have any projects or anything that you would like to plug?
At the moment, I'm taking a little bit of a hiatus, but I will plug my work in progress, always evolving Witch of Lakeland Instagram. It's just at Witch of Lakeland. That is my own little true crime side quest adventure that I dabble in from time to time. And I also have a zine where I talk about all the things, including, true crime specifically, and here in Florida. And that is at Negative Creep Zine. on Instagram.
And it is so cool. It's like the most metal thing I've ever seen.
And like one of these days I'll do another issue, but it's been crazy, and it's very dense, but we have a lot of fun with it. And again, true crime is kind of at the forefront of a lot of what I do. So if you're into it, check it out.
I love it. I love it. It's so well designed. And I, of course, I have a piece of your artwork hanging on my dining room wall now. That's gotten a few comments here and there, just so people find it interesting. And my parents were at my house a lot. And after I hung it up, like my dad noticed. He was like, "Is that piece new?" And I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "My friend did it."
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I'm constantly an appreciator of any project that you do.
Well, thanks, girl. And likewise. And thanks for always having me back. I really appreciate it. It gives me an excuse to really dive into these things and talk about them with someone who knows their stuff. So I really appreciate it.
No, well, and it's been a couple years. So this is not the last time I'll have you on. I'm not a big planner. So who knows when, but you will be back. The next time I watch a movie that just screams Sunny, you'll be getting a text from me.
Perfect. Well, again, I have a pretty loose schedule too, so that works for me.
I was super happy that you could be here. And as for me, I'm going to be continuing the Religion and Horror series for the next several episodes. Next month, I'm going to be joined by friend of the show, Logan, to discuss Frailty from 2001. Which actually has some crossover with this movie. So that'll be fun to talk about. Also, my side hustle, candles. I've got a new batch of candles available on the website. There are 3 spring-summer fragrances, including a brand new fragrance called Summer, which was inspired by Midsummer. And it is a combo of orange blossom, lemon, and honey. So if that sounds good to you, please go to my website. Oh, Haunted, which is rose, and Siren, which is like a sea salt, are also available. So you can go to Light and Shadow Pod/store to pick those up. So folks, thanks for joining us today. Be sure to check out Frailty for next month's episode. Until next time, steer clear of the strange man in the frozen food aisle and stay spooky.
Since 1962, more than 2.5 million boys have been impacted by the guiding influence of godly men through Royal Rangers across the United States and now in 95 countries around the world. Today, our boys and young men need Christian mentors more than ever. They need help navigating the challenges of adolescence and someone to show them what it looks like to be a godly man. The vision of Royal Rangers is to influence more boys and young men than ever, more effectively than ever. Realizing the needs of our boys today cannot be met with the tools of yesterday, Royal Rangers has partnered with U.S. Missions to provide churches the resources to reach the boys of their communities. The Every Boy Initiative is an opportunity to provide our discipleship materials free of charge, eliminate chartering fees for our program, and help any church interested in reaching boys if they use Royal Rangers or not. This bold move will be possible because churches and individuals are willing to partner with us by investing $25 or more each month so that every boy across the United States will have the opportunity to know Jesus and to develop into the man God has created him to be. Our boys are worth fighting for, and we've been doing it for 61 years. Please join us. Thank you for standing in the gap. Your monthly gift will enable us to resource churches in every community and take the gospel to every boy in the United States.